everybody. Welcome to the Bold Strokes Books Bookathon. This is real life romance. This is a first for many of us, and this is going to be quite an exciting panel. And our authors are going to be talking about using their own experiences to influence their writing, vice versa. And unless otherwise stated, they're talking about their personal lives. So please don't give them any crap or you're going to end up on the naughty list. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce everyone so we can get all up in their business. With the release of Summer Lovin', Julie Cannon will have 21 books published by Bold Strokes Books. Her first novel, Come and Get Me, was a finalist for the Golden Crown Literary Society Best Lesbian Romance and Debut Author Awards. Several of her books have also been finalists for the GCLS Best Lesbian Romance, and I Remember won the GCLS Best Lesbian Romance in 2014. Rescue Me and Wishing on a Dream were finalists for the Best Lesbian Romance from the prestigious Lambda Literary Society. Visit her at juliecannon.com. Nathan Burgoine grew up a reader and studied literature in university while making a living as a bookseller. His first published short story was Heart in the collection Fool for Love, New Gay Fiction. This began his long love affair with short fiction, which has seen dozens more short stories published. Hooray! Even though short fiction is his favorite, Nathan stepped into novel writing, and his first novel, Light, was a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award. His first YA novel, Exit Plans for Teenage Freaks, was a finalist for the YA Pre-Aurora Award. Aurora is hard to say. He's also written 5 romance novellas, A Cat Lover. Aww. Nathan has managed to fall in love and marry Daniel, who is a confirmed dog person. Aww. Their ongoing cat or dog detente ended with the rescue of huskies, who are adorable. They live in Ottawa, Canada, where socialized healthcare and gay marriage have yet to cause the sky to cave in. Amanda Radley is an author of contemporary romance comedy and the occasional cozy mystery, my favorite. She's published more than 20 books and has achieved multiple bestseller status internationally, as well as winning a Lambda Award. Woo! She lives in the historic city of Chester, United Kingdom, with her Swedish-born fantasy author wife, which is one of the best sentences I've ever said. Casey Richardson lives in Southern California with her wife and fur kids. Her numerous sports injuries led her to a career in physical therapy, which in turn inspired her to write her first novel, New Beginnings. She loves the creative process of developing characters and storylines. Her favorite part, though, is the editing process, which allows her to continuously learn. Her 5th novel, Seasons for Change, was released in July and is set in her beloved hometown, Lake Tahoe. And last, but very much certainly not least, Melissa Brayden is a multi-award-winning author of 19 contemporary romance novels, all published with Bold Strokes Books. She enjoys crafting, what she hopes are fun, flirty stories with lots and lots of kissing. Aw, I thought that was going to say just she loves crafting. Me too. She lives in San Antonio, Texas with her spouse, Alan, and their 2 tiny, and I have to add here, incredibly adorable children. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. I start off by grabbing this Dostoevsky quote that says, at first, art imitates life, then life will imitate art, then life will find its very existence from the arts. And I bet you didn't expect something so highbrow on your Sunday afternoon, but that is where we pull our inspiration from today. So I'm going to kick my first question to Melissa Brayden, and it is this. Okay. When you first started writing, did you pull from your real life experience? And if not, or if did you purposely stay away? Please give us an example of the book scene or idea and what experience prompted you to lean into or away from it.
Okay, so on the first book, I don't think it really occurred to me to like draw from my own life. I was thinking I'm going to write something wildly fictional and exciting and not to say that my romance is not exciting. I long-term married. We met in the 8th grade. So that kind of gives you proper context of how long this has been going on. But I was writing about adults meeting themselves out there in the workplace for the first time. So yeah, it felt very outside of what my existence was. And so it didn't occur to me on book 1 to pull anything from my world other than just my love of theater into that book. Moving on to book 2, I think the gateway wasn't necessarily the real life romance that I had, but it was through having my niece influence a character that I wrote in the book Heart Block. Grace was a young girl, and I was writing, and I had a niece about the same age, and that influenced it. And I think once that started, then I kind of got an idea of how life can influence art. And I think I did start looking to my own life experiences, and more specifically, how it made me feel, and drawing from my own feelings and how that would then domino effect into action. So emotion into action, as mirrored in my own life, did become a thing that happened in my books. And then, of course, the more I wrote, the more got added in, and it got a little bit more specific as we went. And I think I'm at the point now where, yeah, I'll put anything in, and people will recognize it and make note of the fact that, oh, hey, that actually happened. But I think it was a gradual process.
So if anyone's talking to you and you pull out a pen and a notepad, everyone knows what's going on right now. That's going on.
Yeah, it's all fair game now. Like maybe in the past, not so much, but now, yes.
Julie Cannon, same question.
You know, I would say kind of the same thing that Melissa does. I would say it's a little bit of both. I live in a corporate world, and many jobs ago, it was a very corporate world with buttoned up suits and pantyhose and all that awful nightmarish kind of stuff, but that was years and years and years ago. So I take a little bit from that. I also take a little bit of, what do I want it to be? If I lived in the perfect world, what would it be? What would it look like? And what would these characters say? And what would they do? And I would like to be as witty as some of my characters are, and be able to come up with those things right off the top of my head versus, you know, when you're trying to put it on the page, you've got 6 months to figure out what's the best comeback for this particular thing. And, you know, I think I'll echo what Melissa said also, again, is how it makes her feel. I think I like writing romance because how it makes me feel. It just feels good, and it's all tingly and exciting again. And so the things that I do take from my real life are places, names, people, or not the names of people, street names, my high school, where I went to college, the name of my hometown, stuff like that, but not really people around me. No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, if you're not careful, then people can just totally find you from their books. They could be like, where is she right now?
Well, it's interesting when somebody does read my book, it says, oh, I see, my sister said, you named 2 of your characters after my son. I said, yeah. I needed some names about it. I needed some names, and they were perfect. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
Nathan, same question to you.
I think I actually did it quite consciously at first. And part of it was because the books I was reading, I wasn't necessarily finding the kind of story. So I really enjoy holiday romances. I think it's one of my favorite tropes. For example, when I sat down to write one, I specifically went in with the notion that this family wasn't going to come together at the end. The parents that had been kind of awful to this queer kid, they weren't going to have this magical turnaround all of a sudden, and it wasn't going to close with everybody, you know, singing around the Yule tree, because that's never happened for me. And you know, my happy ending involved getting away from my family. So it was a very conscious choice for that one specifically. That's Ho to write a character who's trying to make it work, and then realizing, no, this is never going to work. And his happy ending is going back to his chosen family and being like, you know, screw them. And that was 100% on purpose. So I think that's the most consciously I've ever done it. But again, like Julie and Melissa, like people I know, like I don't have children, so all my friends' children, they're in the books, you know, like the names, the events. Like I worked retail for mumble years, and I cannot tell you how many weird characters I have in my stories that are 100%, like editors will say things in the margin like, this is a bit strange, and I'm like, okay, I'll have to tone it down from the way it really was, because fiction has to make sense, truth doesn't. So yeah, I definitely draw my real life, but I think Faux Ho Ho was the one I did the most.
All righty. Amanda, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely borrow people and situations. I think quite a lot at first, my conflict point was something in an office or in a workplace, and a lot of the workplaces where I've worked are categorically in my books. Quite a lot of the people are as well. One of the things I noticed I did, it wasn't until much later when I would look back at my books and then realize there was a common thread of something which was definitely related to me, but I hadn't picked up on it. My wife quite often picks up on it. So there was something that I was writing a book and I was writing about that character's parents. And I suddenly realized none of my characters up until that point had ever had parents that were in the book. They were their parents were either dead or just not mentioned or whatever, and I just subconsciously just gone parents, and I love my parents, I really do, but and they're probably watching this, they can be quite frustrating at times, and sometimes, you know, I could just do with them not being there. And I realized I'd done that for probably about 15 books once. So yeah, subconsciously I do find when I go back I realize I've put things in. Any children, a little bit like Nathan says, we don't have children, so my niece is in this book. My first book was Flight SQA 016, which is being re-released with BSB now, and Henry in that book is absolutely my niece. All the little quirks that Henry has in the book, and people say, oh, that's so cute, you must be a mum. I'm like, no, I've seen my niece about 2 weeks in total for the year, and that's all been drilled down into this one character. So yeah, a lot does end up being distilled into books.
Well, as long as you're not like, yeah, no, I'm not a mom, but I spend a lot of time around playgrounds, yeah, or something like that would just alarm everybody. Casey, same question.
Well, years ago, Bold Strokes had an author and fan event in Palm Springs, and I went to it, and Nell Stark and Kim Baldwin were giving a talk on how to get started as a writer. And the most important information that I took from that is write what you know. So being a former college basketball player and working in the physical therapy field, Jordan Roberts was born for New Beginnings. So, but in most of my stories, there are people that I know in there. You know, I take a little bit from so-and-so and a little bit more from this other person, and you know, experiences that I've had and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's fun, and especially for my friends that I take from and they see themselves in the book. And I make sure that they're always good characters, because I don't want any of my friends mad at me.
I don't blame you there. Well, we're going to stick with you. We're going into our next question here. I think everyone already kind of answered, like, is this something they do regularly? Do they plan to keep on doing it? I think the answer is a resounding yes from everyone. So let's go ahead and ask, have you ever written a book or a scene that reflected life as you think it should be? So rather than something that happened to you, something that you wish it was, or would that kind of writing feel dishonest to you?
I try to keep things true, even though it's fiction. Places that I write, I may change the names of, but they're places I've been and know about. Lake Tahoe was pretty much the only one that I kept things true as far as places that the characters go, because I grew up there and I know that place like the back of my hand. So, but you know, stories that I've written, there's a lot of true stories within those, especially some of the basketball stories. I'm taking a shot at love. Athena calls Lisa Ice as a nickname. And that happened, the story that led up to why she's called that happened to me and one of my teammates in college. So there's a lot of true stories within my fictional books. So, and I'm going to keep writing like that because it's what I know.
Awesome. Amanda, we're going backwards here.
I'd say there are certain scenes that I write that have reflected reality, and I generally try to keep things quite truthful rather than write in sort of, you know, a lovely fantasy world of things, because I think it's more realistic. Although, like Nathan said, sometimes, you know, you write something that's absolutely true that happened, and your editor looks at it, or your proofreader looks at it and says, oh no, that's, you've missed the mark there, that could never happen. And you think, oh, okay, I have to revisit that because life is just too strange. But yeah, I try to keep things like relatively realistic. And if I do think it's something, I mean, we've all had those weird situations where so many things have come together, and you think, if I told someone this, they would never believe this happened. And those things, I just ignore them and don't put them in a book. That's just for me to enjoy. Occasionally, I might tell my wife, or she's with me, and I'm like, no one will ever believe that this happened. And those things, they just can't go in books, because it is just stranger than fiction.
Well, it's good though, is it gives you some stories. As someone is like, did that really happen? You're like, come gather around, children. Let me tell you the unbelievable stories. Nathan.
I think, so if we're talking about, for example, like specifically, if we're talking about things in queer culture, I do my absolute damnedest to get it as right as I can. Something that comes up, I've gotten criticism from readers, not from queer readers, I should be clear. I've gotten criticism from readers sometimes with my romances that they don't like that my men will shoulder check to make sure they're somewhere safe before they kiss, for example. But that's just reality. That's what it's like to live in most places. So I'm not going to get rid of that because people like the fantasy of, it shouldn't matter, it doesn't matter, because it does. So on those micro scales, I do try to keep the world as real as possible. From specifically, if you're asking if I've ever rewritten the world to be better than it was, there is a scene in Fo Ho Ho that is 100% wish fulfillment, where the son is being sort of shoved around by his incredibly conservative family. They're basically talking down to him, and unknown to them, on a whim, by accident, he ended up in some kickboxing classes, and he ends up kicking his eldest brother in the face to get away from them. And it was the most viscerally enjoyable scene I think I've written in my life. Nothing like that ever got to happen for me in real life. Like, I never got to throw a punch at a bigot, but it was so much fun to write.
That is awesome. Julie.
I've been thinking about the question, and some of it is from real life, especially when, I was in a situation before where two companies merged, and it was nothing but a power play among the two different companies. And, who's going to come out ahead or on top, regardless of what the situation is. So, there was some of that nasty infighting kind of stuff, but I think I write more about the way what I would like things to be. It's fiction, and let's just disappear into something feel good. A lot of it is real life. It hasn't been my real life in probably most cases, but I think generally speaking, with all the books I've written, it touches some part of somebody's life somewhere along the line. And your point or everybody's point of, you can't make this shit up, so I'm not going to put it in the book because nobody's going to believe it. Anybody that works in human resources or an emergency room or police or a nurse or anything like that, you can't make up the stuff that people do, that they tell you that people do. So it's a fine line between putting something in there and other people saying, that really isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So mine's really a mix of both.
So Nathan was saying about working in retail, which I did for quite a few number of years. So yeah, I would believe it because I've probably seen it. Uh-huh. Melissa.
First of all, I write traditional contemporary romance, and I do think I'm old school to a certain extent, that I do lean towards an idealism, and a lot of what I write is hyperbolic, and it is anchored in reality and everything that we know and believe and hold true. But a lot of things are elevated. So if I were to include if Alan were to bring me a hot fudge sundae home unannounced, just this lovely gesture. Oh my gosh, a hot fudge sundae, that's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. But in the book, maybe the character has rented out the ice cream shop for a special evening. You know, we just kind of give it that extra added boost because we're talking about a book here. Why is this a book? Why is this romance that I'm reading about elevated, you know, enough to have its own story in print for you to take it home, for it to stand above all others? And I think to kind of get it there, we have to lean a little bit on idealism. But at the same time, you know, the other panelists have made fantastic points in that it has to be believable as well, and that there are norms and there are situations that we have to deal with that need to be woven in, but it's just a matter of each author finding the right weight to what that. But I do find personally as an author, I tend to lean towards the hyperbolic, the grand gestures, the big things, and when I'm bringing things from my own romance or my own life in, I might elevate them a little bit. But the hot fudge sundae is great either way. I'll take it.
Well, but this sort of leads to the next question. Have you ever found yourself wishing that you could have an experience that you've written for your characters? Like when you get the hot fudge sundae, are you like, well, you know, she rented out a whole ice cream parlor for her love? I'm just saying.
Did you read this? No.
Yes. If you'd read the book, you would have known.
Are you going to me with that question? Or
I am. No,
okay.
I'm going to you.
And wait, what was it again?
Have you ever found yourself wishing you could have an experience that you invented for your characters?
Oh, of course. I think as writers, there has to be an element of living out our own fantasies a little bit. And it can have to do with the grand gesture. And I think sometimes for me, if I'm capturing a moment and reproducing it on the page and even elevating it, I might think, well, how could it have gone better? What could I have said that would have been more romantic in that moment, receiving that hot fudge sundae? How could I have I wish I had said this, or I wish I had said that. And now I have an opportunity to make that happen for the characters. And that's some therapy right there. That's nice. That's and it's so satisfying to kind of see that moment molded and shaped and made into something that's not necessarily better, but a cool way to incorporate it into fiction.
What about you, Casey?
When I write characters and things that they do, I also like to add in stuff that I wouldn't normally do. That like one of my characters had a weight issue, and she, because of health issues, she got healthy and she lost some weight and began exercising. But one of her favorite workouts is pole dancing, like doing pole classes. And that's something I would never, ever do. My best friend does it, and she's the one that helped me out with those scenes, and she's great at it. And it's amazing what those women can do. But, you know, or, you know, in A Call Away, when Abby is teaching Sid about having to raise chickens, like, I would love to have chickens, but I just can't even imagine like taking care of them and doing all the stuff that needs to go along with being on a farm. So, yeah.
I imagine that happens a lot when you're talking about things like livestock. You're like, you know, nice in the book, don't ever really want to experience that.
I'll stick with my dog and my cat. They're good. Yeah.
What about you, Julie? Have you ever written an experience that you wish you could have?
Other than, you know, like I said earlier, I wish I could be that witty or that smart or have that come back right at the tip of my tongue. What I do is I'll be sitting in a meeting, especially when we were all in the office and you're in this big conference or this meeting or in a conference room, and I'm thinking, okay, what would so-and-so, one of my characters, do in this situation? How would they sit? How would they hold their pen? How would they look at people, and what would they be thinking during this meeting? So I take my characters and kind of become them in some respects, than the other way around, than my characters being a reflection of me.
I see. Okay.
Maybe that's my schizophrenia, my multiple personalities, not quite sure, but I think, okay, we're having this, you know, discussion here. When I tap my pen, should I be paying better attention? Obviously, I should be paying better attention.
Yeah, everyone knows now, if they're having a meeting with you, you are not paying attention.
I am not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of take on the persona of one of my characters, I think, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
Amanda, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of wish fulfillment when you're writing a book. So yeah, there are occasions where something happens that I would wish would happen to me, but I think in general it's more the entire book is a story with all the boring parts of life cut out. Like no one's going to the shop because they run out of milk. No one is in the middle of doing something and having a phone call interrupt them. No one's having any sort of junk mail come through the door in the morning. It's just a nice long story. Yeah, they may have conflict points, but that boring part of life that we all just kind of have to get through every day, that's all missing. So I think for me, that wish fulfillment of never having to think about what to have for dinner, because I'll just send them out on a date to a wonderful restaurant and that's that dealt with. So it's that wish fulfillment of not having to worry about all the sort of mundaneness of life.
Yeah, I always laughed at the ones that nobody ever accidentally gets their hair pulled during sex. That was one that I always thought was just hilarious. Nathan.
Well, like you, Barbara, I write in fantasy as well as romance. So sometimes my vendor. So obviously some of the wish fulfillment, yes, I would 100% love to be telekinetic. It wouldn't end well, but I would love to do that. But I think the biggest sort of wish fulfillment one I got was when I decided to write a YA novel, realizing how different the world is, especially in a place like Ottawa, which is where I set mine, now as to my own childhood. So with Exit Plans, he got the childhood I never could have had. Like, he was out, he knew who he was, it hasn't been a problem, he's got a group of queer friends, and he's 16 years old. So that was the entire process of writing that book, was wish fulfillment and time travel. And it was so enjoyable. Like Melissa said, it was better than therapy, like just imagining what this life could have been like. And also he teleports, but even without that, it was pretty cool.
No, I take it. Yeah, I'll take any of the superpowers. Thank you. Though if I did get superpowers, I'd probably get something really lame, like being able to tell where any jacket was purchased or something like that. That's just useless. All right, let's stay with Nathan and take a question from the peoples. If you could step into the life of one of your characters, who would it be and why?
Ooh, that's actually really tough. Actually, maybe it's not as tough as I think. There's a character who threads his way through almost all of my short stories in my collection of Echoes Born, Ian Simon. And he has the ability to see how people are feeling. So he looks at people, he sees sort of auras around them, and he knows what the colors mean. And he can sort of see the past, and he can see the present, and sometimes even the future. And it generally aims him in a direction towards justice. So I would love to have that power. I would love to be able to walk into places where things had gone wrong and be able to actively just pull out of the ether a solution. So yeah, definitely Ian.
All righty. KC, what about you?
I think I would want to be Sean from Seasons for Change, owning a diner on the west shore of Lake Tahoe. And for those of you who haven't been to Lake Tahoe, I grew up on the South Shore, which is where most of the tourists go with the casinos and so forth. But on the West Shore, where the story takes place, it's not a whole lot of tourists there. They're mostly locals. Everybody knows everyone else. They all look out for each other. And just to have like her cabin in the woods where you can't spit on the neighbor's house, that you have room and you're walk away from going down to the lake or a walk up the hill to go have a hike. Just all of those outdoor activities at her hand right there. And, the friends that she has from the diners, her surrogate grandfathers are a hoot. I just really love that way of life. And I wish I could have that way of life. So I when I win the lottery, I'm definitely buying a vacation home up on the West Shore.
Amanda.
For me, I think it would be Captain Caroline West from my book Lost at Sea. So she's a cruise ship captain So she's sailing around at the Mediterranean mainly, stopping off in all these interesting ports of call. But she's also got tons of money, so she has a yacht which she keeps in Napoli. So, you know, when she's not aboard the ship living in luxury there, she's on her little quiet yacht. So yeah, I think that was for me.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take 2 of those. Julie.
I'd like to live on a noisy yacht for that matter. I mean, you know, I think I live a little bit of each of my characters. I would have to say probably Elliot in my first book, Come and Get Me, just because she was my first character. It's like your first love, your first child. You know, you love all of them equally, but just a little bit different. There was just something about her and the whole experience of writing her and being her. You know, she was successful. She could have any woman that she wants. She ended up with somebody who, you know, falling for someone who just like she really had to work for to get. So I think I would have to say Elliot from Come and Get Me.
Also put her on the yacht and she's just getting more and more perfect.
That's right.
Melissa.
I think in terms of whose life I want to lead, I'm going to Tangle Valley and I want to live on that vineyard and I want to be Joey and live that kind of life. But if we're talking about character traits, like who do I wish I could be like, it would be one of the more badass characters, like a Jessica Lennox, who is totally in control of her own life and walks into a room and just owns it. A Becca Crawford type, all the Emery Owens that just kind of wear the power suit and take everyone by storm. I would wish I had that kind of life force energy. But if we're going to live somewhere, I want to go to Tangle Valley.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could be one of the power characters living in Tangled Valley. So, I mean,
yeah,
why not have
why
both?
not? Yeah.
Of course,
well, I think Becca gets to move to that vineyard, so maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, this is perfect for a crossover between the Tangled Valley and this and any of your other ones, the Soho Loft ones or anything.
Bring the New York girls to the winery. Yeah.
Yes, crossover time.
Perfect. Sold.
Okay, so let's pick on somebody we haven't picked on first. I don't think Amanda has gone first yet in question time. So let's start with you with a toughie. Has your writing ever helped you process events or feelings from real life? We were talking about therapy a little bit earlier, even if you and your characters' experiences aren't the same. And is writing your go-to for working out complicated feelings? Can you give us examples?
Thanks so much. Yeah. I think without me realizing, I was doing that a lot. And again, with the hindsight, I now look back and realize that, oh, maybe I've written the same theme a little bit in certain books or in certain scenes and kind of think, well, that's come up more than once. Maybe I should speak to someone about that, or just continue to write it and work through. But fitting in, one of my books, which was released last year, this has an autistic character in it. My very first book, Flight, has an autistic character in it, and I'm autistic. So it's interesting because, yeah, I'm sure I am working through some issues when I write that. I write those characters because my very first book had an autistic character, and so many people came out and said, I'm Olivia. That's me. I do those things. And I wasn't necessarily, I'm not going to say everything that Olivia does is something that I do, but there were traits that either myself or a friend would have, and it went into the book. And it was very pleasing to have that feedback from people who were obviously saying, oh my God, I've seen myself in a book. I've never seen myself in a book before. So those things I definitely do. And I'm sure if we do this panel again in a year, I'll come up with a load more, because I do seem to write things and then later on I look back and I kind of flip through books I wrote, 2 years ago and go, oh, apparently I do that, or apparently I've done that more than once. So it's a journey. It's a process, I think.
I think you're right. I've done that too. Look back and say, a lot of people get murdered in this book. What was happening to me then? It's probably best not to think about it too much. Melissa, Brayden.
I think, yeah, you can work some things out in books. I was kind of pondering the question just now, and like, for example, in my life, in my relationship, of the two of us, I'm probably the one that's a little bit more stoic. Alan is a little more sentimental. I'm sentimental too, but he'll be the one to get the tears in his eyes first, like when something sweet happens with the kids. He's quicker to that draw. And I think when you're writing a relationship, that's something that you can try on a little bit. When I'm writing a couple, there's usually one character that I identify a little bit more with. They're a little closer to me, and maybe through that character, I explore emotional vulnerability more. And I take that character a little bit further. And when you're writing in their shoes, you're getting to go through their experiences in a way as well. And so it's almost like you're auditioning different ways of reacting and emotions. And it can be therapeutic, and it can be enlightening as to your own life, but it also helps you make some interesting character discoveries for the character themselves. I remember recently writing Madison in the third Tangle Valley book, and she's similar to me in that way. And so it was a lot of comparison to my own life and trying it on. And I think it made it a textured writing experience to come up with the character who was different than me, but also similar. And then what I learned about myself in the process, I could apply to my own life. So there is a lot of messy bleeding through fiction and real life, kind of like the quote you started this off with at the beginning of our panel.
Well, that's very interesting, because those characters who are more like you, do you think you're harder on them, or you treat them more gently?
I'm harder on them. I don't know about you guys if you're the same way, but I put them through the ringer more, I think. And it depends on which characteristic. Like with Madison, that was something that she was similar to me in terms of she doesn't make herself vulnerable. But I've had other characters that I'm a kind of a quirky person, and the character of Brooklyn from Soho and Hadley from Seven Shores, those are some of my quirks. And so for them, they got to have a little bit more fun. So I think it depends on what characteristic we're talking about.
Casey.
Yeah, when I was writing Courageous Love, and Alex was diagnosed with breast cancer, just as she was starting to go through treatment, my grandmother had passed away from bone marrow cancer. And then about a month and a half later, another friend died from cancer quickly. And I had to put the story away for a while because it was just too hard to write. But then I was able to give Alex what I couldn't give to my grandmother and my friend, and that's survival. So that was a really tough story to write, but I kept my friend and my grandmother in mind as I was having Alex survive it. And I wish that I could have given my grandmother and my friend that, but at least I was able to give that to Alex.
That's awesome. I love that. And it just makes it a whole thing ring more true, make more heartfelt. Julie.
Well, I'm listening to everybody, and I'm thinking,
she's not paying attention.
No,
we know.
I'm thinking, now how should I say? No, I'm thinking none of this applies to me. Maybe I'm not cerebral enough in my writing, but I don't know. I've never used it to work something out. I've never experienced anything like Casey has. And how do I deal with that? How do I write working through this? It just doesn't, I don't know if I'm lucky or if I'm dense, or I don't know, but I know when things are not going well in my life for some reason or another, not the way that I want it to be, I will voraciously read anything romance, happily ever after that I can get my hands on, because it makes me feel good, and it makes me realize, okay, things are going to be okay. But I'm maybe the odd man woman out of this. It doesn't affect me like that now.
I don't think so, because maybe even subconsciously you're writing happily ever after romances because other people out there are going through some shit. Well, so yeah, you're like, true. Don't be so hard on yourself, Julie. Just because you're not paying attention doesn't mean you don't have something to offer.
Thank you, Barbara. I'll write that down. I'll remember that.
Awesome, Nathan.
I think there's one thing in particular I have done, and I've done it a couple of times with a couple of characters, Andre and I think Morgan. So I'm a big fan of therapy. So I will put some of my characters in therapy, and they will actually have discussions with their therapists on page or reference to the fact that they've been with their therapist. But I think the biggest piece I did, there's this rather relentless sort of, I don't know how to even put this, but you know, the whole scars are beautiful, your scars are beautiful, love your scars, that we get punched with in the face. That's not how everyone feels about their scars. It's certainly not how I feel about my scars. So I've written a couple of characters now who reach at best a kind of a neutral detente. And it was really therapeutic to write the kind of character who's like, I am never going to love this thing, but I'm not going to let this thing have power over me anymore either. And finding that neutral spot of, okay, this is fine. I don't have to love this thing. So that was a really sort of important thing that my therapist was telling me I needed to do myself. It was so much easier to do it for a character, for the record. But yeah, that I think that definitely bled in from real life 100%. And those characters, I find I actually get quite a few comments on that. Maybe spins back to what Amanda was saying, that like I've had people contact me and say, I'm like this, like I feel this way. And so that made me feel like maybe it was definitely worthwhile to try that.
I think so, and that's lovely. And I always tell my writers, I'm also an editor, in case any of you have been living under a rock. But I always tell my writers that, you know, feelings in real life are stupid. We all know this. We don't want to deal with them, but your characters kind of have to. Okay, with that in mind, have you ever written a character who is like an exemplar, an example? This is who I would love to be. Do you ever find yourself wishing or thinking, what would so-and-so do? Sort of as Julie did this earlier. But I want to hear specifically from the rest of you, who is this character? What is it about them that you would like to be? And I think I'm going to pick on Casey first, because I don't think she's gone first yet.
I have, but I'll go again.
Well,
that's okay.
never mind.
So when I was going over these questions, I thought that you know, I love my characters and they're all fantastic, but the one who I like to pull from is not one of my characters. When I feel like I need to grow a pair, if I need to like be very strong and stick up for myself, it's Kane Casey that I'll read from Allie.
Yeah.
There was an instance where we were visiting my cousin, and her husband was, you know, he was being okay, but he was being kind of a jerk at some point, and I was reading Kane at the time. And I didn't throw him in a meat grinder like Allie would have, but I stood up for myself, and I stood up for my cousin and backed him down. So I was pretty happy with myself when I did that. And I thank Kane for that.
That's awesome. Nathan.
I'm going to go back to Fohoho and Silas kicking the bigot in the face, but just specifically by the end of that book, he is in a place where he is just so finally willing to be uncompromising about who he is. And, you know, it bothers me that I'm in my 40s going on my 50s, and I still watch how I gesture in public, or like how I speak, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm so consciously aware, depending on the room and who I'm with. I mean, obviously when I'm around a bunch of queer people, it all comes out. But he hits that point so much younger where he's like, screw this isn't worth it. So yeah, I think I would love to channel more of that energy.
Julie, what would so-and-so do?
Yeah, and you know, I think when I said, you know, I think in real life, what would so-and-so do in this particular situation, whether it's at a party, at a park, you know, moving, you know, something like that. I take it as an opportunity to maybe think differently than what I would normally think. You know, how should I react versus how would I react? Again, speaking up when I need to, putting somebody in their place. I'd probably do that a whole lot more than I've done before. And I think I've gotten some courage from my characters to do that. To KC's point, occasionally you need to get in front of somebody and, tell them what's what. And so I think when I think about that, each of my characters have given me a strength and an understanding of what I could be. So there really isn't any specific favorite one or scene about that. I just look at them as a whole, and if they did that, then does that apply to what's going on right here?
Melissa.
Badasses and business suits aside, I think when times get hard for me, or I don't have a lot to give, or I'm just facing adversity or feeling low, I try to set the bar low for myself. And I have kind of a motto that says, just be a good person, Melissa. That's all you have to do for today. Just be a good person. And on that note, I look to some of the kind-hearted characters. And if I'm saying, what would they do? I think I'd probably go with Elizabeth Draper from Beautiful Dreamer, because she is a friend to all. She's doesn't have any problem putting herself out there, dressing up in a chicken suit to cheer somebody up. She just leads with being good. And so when I'm moving through life, I would like to be more like a character like her. I'm not there yet. I'm a work in progress, but it helps to remind myself.
Nice. Amanda.
I think I tackled this the other way. And I was thinking when Julie said that maybe she doesn't do as we do, I didn't know I was putting myself or people into books for many books. Like, it took me a long time to realize what I was doing. Again, if I was having this panel 2 years ago, I would say, well, categorically, I didn't put anyone I know in my books, and no, I'm not in these books, and no, it all comes out of my head. I make everything up. It's been a long process to work out that actually, oh no. And one of the things my wife told me, I'm quite known for writing ice queens in books, specifically corporate ice queens. And it took me a long time to realize that they're me. And my wife had to tell me that they're me. Quite often when an ice queen is saying something sarcastic, that's come out of my mouth at some point. So I'm kind of looking at this the other way around, that I don't particularly model myself on them, but I know I have sort of left a trail of disaster through my back catalogue of things I have said that maybe I shouldn't have always said. They're in those characters. So I've sort of just left a piece of me throughout my back catalogue. Probably not all the best pieces, but sometimes the funnier bits.
Do you realize that while you're writing them, or is it only afterwards, after they're published?
Barbara, I don't have a clue. I have no self-awareness at all. And my wife will pick up a book, and because I write sort of, sometimes I've written 6 books a year, 4 books a year is standard. My wife is also a writer, so she does not have time to read my books, but sometimes she'll help me with the audiobook. So she'll listen to the audiobook for mistakes and anything. And she'll pause it and come into my office and she'll go, do you know that you're this person? And I'm, what? And she'll go, you said that, like this, maybe not that exact scene, but that's definitely something that either you've said or would say. So no, I have no awareness of it. It comes up way later during the audiobook process that my wife will flag it up to me.
Well, it seems to be working well. I mean, people like your books, so
yeah, clearly it works.
Keep it on.
Yeah, just keep on being the sarcastic ice queen, I guess. Can we just edit this bit out?
Unfortunately, no. When it's live, it's words and all. But I think people then will be like, I wonder what she's like, and they'll go run into your books and they'll try and pick you out of each and every single one of them. So that'll be fun for you when they meet you in person.
Yep, I'll get those emails.
So real quick, let's have everybody tell us what their latest release is. And if they have a copy, to go ahead and hold it up. Amanda.
My latest is Flight SQA 016, which is a re-release of my very first book. So that's out. It's been re-edited, and it contains an ice queen, funnily enough.
Look for glimpses of you. Melissa.
My last release was What a Tangled Web. It was book 3 in the Tangle Valley series. Took a slot off to have a child, and I've got Marry Me coming up in November.
Yay, Julie.
Summer Lovin' behind me was released in July. It's about 3 stories about 3 women with fun and lovin' in the summer, obviously. And the next thing I'm working on is a trilogy with 3 other fabulous authors that will be released on Valentine's Day. And the book is called My Secret Valentine. And each one of us is writing a story about a secret love that's revealed on Valentine's Day.
KC.
Seasons for Change was released in July. And like I said before, it's set up in Lake Tahoe. And Sean and Morgan start out as friends that develops into a little something more. So
Nice. Nathan.
Sorry. My most recent was a romance novella called A Little Village Blend, which has a slight dash of magic and is set in my Ottawa version of the village. And my next one, next year, I'm actually also doing a little trio. 3 YA authors, myself, Jeffrey Ricker, and J. Marshall Freeman, are releasing a trio of novellas called 3 Left Turns to Nowhere, about 3 teen boys who get stuck in a small town in Ontario in the middle of nowhere, and the town is trying to nudge them in the right direction.
Okay. I hope everything turns out well for them and for everyone. And thank you, all of my dear, lovely authors, for taking part of my panel. And thank you, everyone, for stopping in to see us. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Mhm.
Hi, everybody.